The auctioneer's gavel hung in the damp Manhattan air, about to fall on her grandmother's ring for a mere $400 when the double doors blasted open. A dozen armed men flooded the room, and a cold, terrifying voice echoed from the shadows. "Stop the sale! I am buying the building, the inventory." And everyone inside. The linoleum floor of the liquidation warehouse at 412 Grand Street was caked with 3 decades of spilled diesel and dried mud. Nora's fingernails were bitten down to the quick, raw and bleeding beneath the fluorescent flicker of a buzzing overhead tube that sounded like a dying hornet. Her left hand trembled so violently she had to tuck it deep inside the pocket of her oversized, moth-eaten wool coat to stop the shaking from broadcasting her absolute terror to the room. Around her, 5 men in cheap, sweat-stained polyester suits laughed. They weren't laughing at a joke. They were laughing at the deliberate, sadistic slowness of the torture. "Going once!" shouted Vincent Rossi, leaning his heavy, gut-heavy frame over the scarred mahogany podium. His forehead glistened with grease under the glare. $450 for the platinum band and the sapphire chip. Do I hear 500 from the floor? Anyone? The dead junkie's widow needs diaper money, gentlemen. Nora opened her mouth, but her throat was completely dry, caked with dust and the metallic taste of panic. Her daughter, 3-year-old Lily, was sitting on a crushed cardboard box by the radiator, her small ribs visible beneath a thin pink sweater, clutching a stuffed rabbit with a missing eye. They had eaten nothing since yesterday morning, except half a stale sleeve of saltines Nora found in the glove box of their repossessed 2012 Honda Civic. The ring, sitting on the black velvet pad under Rossi's brass lamp, was the very last thing she owned in this world that wasn't tied to a bill collector or a funeral home. It wasn't just jewelry. It was the only tangible proof that someone, somewhere, had once loved her, before her life imploded into a nightmare of debt, grief, and predatory loans sharks. $450, Rossi sneered, his gaze locking onto Nora with predatory amusement. "Salt to the empty air in the back. Step up, little bird. Hand over the transfer fee, or security tosses you out into the sleet." Nora took a single, leaden step forward. Her boots, soles worn completely through to the damp cardboard she'd shoved inside to keep out the November slush, squeaked against the grease. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird beating its wings to powder. Then came the sound. It wasn't a knock. It was the explosive crack of solid mahogany, splintering under an absolute, coordinated impact. The reinforced double doors at the front of the warehouse didn't just open. They blew inward, tearing off their heavy iron hinges and crashing flat onto the concrete floor with a deafening roar. Silence dropped over the room instantly. A heavy, suffocating silence that smelled of high-grade gun oil, expensive cedarwood cologne, and impending execution. A dozen men poured through the wreckage in precise, tactical formation. They wore tailored charcoal overcoats, black leather gloves, and carried suppressed submachine guns held at a low, ready position. They didn't shout warnings. They didn't make theatrical threats. They simply fanned out with terrifying, silent efficiency, cutting off every exit, every window, every dark corner of the warehouse until the 30 attendees were pinned in a bridge of crosshairs. Vincent Rossi dropped his wooden gavel. It rolled off the podium and clattered against the base of Nora's boots. What is the meaning of this?" Rossi stammered, his face instantly draining from florid red to a sickly, pasty grey. He grabbed the edges of the podium, his knuckles turning white. This is a private liquidation sanctioned by the state municipal court. You can't. A single man stepped through the parting wall of guards. He moved with an easy, unhurried grace that felt entirely unnatural amidst the chaos. He was tall, dressed in a bespoke midnight blue Italian wool overcoat, with the collar turned up against the bitter wind. His dark hair was threaded with silver at the temples, framing a sharp, chiseled face carved from stone and ancient grief. Deep, shadowed hollows sat beneath piercing, amber-flecked eyes that swept over the room not with anger, but with a cold, absolute emptiness. It was the face of a man who had already buried everyone he ever cared about and was simply waiting for the rest of the world to catch up to his executioner. Dante Moretti. The name wasn't whispered. It was felt like a drop in barometric pressure. Even the petty thugs from the neighborhood knew the legend of the North American syndicate's youngest underboss, the ghost who took over the docks in 2012, and left a trail of silent inquiries in his wake. Dante didn't look at Rossi. He didn't look at the trembling crowd cowering against the metal shelves stacked with rusted power tools and abandoned televisions. His dark, impenetrable gaze locked straight onto the velvet pad on the podium, specifically onto the platinum and sapphire ring sitting under the brass lamp. "Pick it up," Dante said. His voice was a low, resonant baritone that seemed to vibrate directly inside the marrow of Nora's bones. It had no sharp edges, yet it commanded absolute, instantaneous obedience. Rossi swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing violently. "Mr. Moretti, I didn't know you had an interest in probate liquidation." "I said," Dante repeated, his voice dropping an octave, turning the air in the room to ice. "Pick it up." Rossi's trembling fingers reached out, snagging the tiny metal band between a thumb and forefinger, as if it were a live scorpion. He held it out on his palm, his hand shaking so badly the ring rattled against his skin. Dante didn't take it from him. Instead, he stepped closer, his heavy leather boots clicking rhythmically against the concrete. The guards tightened their circle. The air grew so thin, Nora felt her lungs seize up. She pulled Lily closer to her side, shielding the child's eyes against the folds of her coat, whispering a silent, frantic prayer into the little girl's tangled hair. Dante stopped 3 feet from the podium. He turned his head slightly, his gaze finally shifting away from the ring and landing directly on Nora. For a fraction of a second, something flickered behind those dead amber eyes. A microscopic hitch in his breath. A sudden sharp contraction of his pupils, as if he had just looked into a mirror reflecting a ghost from 20 years ago. "You," Dante whispered, the word escaping him before he could swallow it back. The warehouse grew so still, you could hear the greasy sleet hissing against the corrugated iron roof outside. Dante Moretti did not blink. His tall, imposing frame remained completely rigid, yet the hand inside his coat pocket clenched into a fist so hard the straining fabric screamed under the pressure. "Name," Dante commanded, stepping past Rossi as if the auctioneer were nothing more than a stain on the floorboards. Nora pressed her back hard against the metal shelving unit, feeling the cold wire dig painfully through her coat. She kept her chin up, refusing to let the tears spilling over her eyelashes show him how thoroughly broken she was. Pride was the only armor she had left, and she'd be damned if she let a syndicate killer strip her of that too. "Nora," she said, her voice cracking only slightly on the vowels. "Nora Brooks. Now let us go." "We didn't bid on anything. We were leaving." "Brooks." Dante tasted the name on his tongue like something foreign and bitter. He took another step forward, closing the distance until the scent of cedar, tobacco, and high-end bourbon washed over her. He was close enough now for her to see the jagged, pale white scar running from just beneath his left ear down into the collar of his crisp white shirt, a souvenir from the night in 1998 when his entire family was wiped off the board. "You lied on the manifest," Dante said softly, his amber eyes narrowing. He reached out with one gloved hand, his fingers hovering just an inch above the air between them, trembling with a strange, restrained fury. "People like Vincent don't just put heirlooms of the Manhattan judiciary up for a $400 liquidation unless there's a paper trail buried deep beneath municipal debt. Let me see your right hand." "No," Nora snapped, pulling her hand deeper into her pocket. With a blur of motion too fast for the eye to track, Dante's bodyguard, Matteo, was across the room. He didn't draw a gun. He simply grabbed Nora's wrist with iron precision and forced her hand out of her pocket, sliding the oversized sleeve back. Under the harsh yellow light of the overhead bulb, the inner flesh of Nora's wrist was exposed. There, stamped in faint, faded blue ink, was a serial number and a tiny, stylized crest, a blind-folded scale of justice cradled inside an oak leaf. Rossi gasped, clutching his chest. "Sweet Mother of God, she's a Higgins." The name dropped into the room like a live grenade. Every single mob enforcer in the warehouse shifted their weight, their submachine guns lifting a fraction of an inch. The air turned volatile, charged with the static electricity of ancient blood feuds. Nora squeezed her eyes shut, a bitter sob tearing out of her throat. The secret she had spent 4 years guarding, the secret that kept her hiding in run-down motels from Harlem to Queens under a dead woman's alias, was laid bare in the filth of a liquidation warehouse. "Arthur Higgins," Dante whispered, the name tasting like ash and vengeance. His face went entirely blank, drained of every drop of color, until he looked like a marble statue carved for a tomb. The federal judge who signed the warrants, the man who orchestrated the 1998 raids that locked my father away, to rot in a federal penitentiary until he died of a broken heart. Dante looked back down at Nora, his chest rising and falling in deep, ragged breaths. The casual, untouchable coldness was gone, replaced by a devastating, raw vulnerability that made his jaw clench until the muscles stood out like cables. "You're his daughter," Dante said, his voice dropping to a harsh, breathless rasp. The judge's golden girl, the one they hid away in Europe while her father liquidated the Moretti Empire. "I haven't spoken to my father since the day I turned 18, Nora cried out, her voice breaking through the terror. Driven by a sudden, fierce surge of maternal desperation. She dropped to her knees to pull Lily into her arms, shielding the child's face against her shoulder. "He disowned me the day I married Daniel. He cut me off, he threw me out, and he left me with nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing. I am not a Higgins. I am just a mother trying to keep her starving baby alive in a city that wants us dead." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled, water-stained eviction notice, thrusting it blindly toward Dante's chest. "Take the ring, take it all. Buy the whole damn building and lock us up if that's what your revenge demands. Just let my daughter go to a hospital." Dante stared down at the crumpled paper in his hand. He didn't read it. Instead, his eyes drifted down to 3-year-old Lily, who peeked out from her mother's shoulder, her big blue eyes blinking up at the terrifying circle of armed men, before burying her face back into Nora's neck with a soft, frightened whimper. Something inside Dante Moretti, something that had been frozen solid since November 14th, 1998, shattered. He slowly lowered himself down onto one knee, ignoring the filthy grease staining the expensive fabric of his trousers. With agonizing slowness, he reached out and picked up the platinum and sapphire ring from Rossi's dropped palm. He didn't look at Rossi. He didn't look at his men. "Matteo," Dante said, his voice dangerously soft. "Boss?" "By the building," Dante whispered, never breaking eye contact with the trembling woman and the child in front of him. "Then take Rossi out back and make sure he never holds another gavel as long as he lives. And call Dr. Hale. Tell him to meet us at the penthouse on Park Avenue in 20 minutes. Dante extended his bare hand, peeling off the black leather glove. He held out the sapphire ring toward Nora, his thumb brushing lightly against her knuckles, skin against skin, warm, trembling, and alive. "Your father kept records, Nora," Dante murmured, his amber eyes burning with a dark, terrifying intensity that promised a storm the city had never seen. "And you're going to help me find every last page of them. But tonight you are safe." The ride inside the bulletproof Maybach partition was a cage of absolute, suffocating stillness. The city lights of Manhattan blurred into streaks of amber and bruised violet against the reinforced glass. But inside the leather-lined cabin, the only sound was the shallow, rhythmic breathing of 3-year-old Lily, fast asleep against Nora's chest. The child's feverish heat radiated through her thin sweater, a constant burning reminder of the hours spent shivering in the unheated warehouse on Grand Street. Dante sat on the opposite leather bench, perfectly motionless. He had not taken off his overcoat, nor had he shifted his posture since sliding into the car outside the liquidation house. His gaze remained fixed straight ahead, but out of the corner of his eye, every micro-movement Nora made was catalogued with predatory precision. "She has pneumonia," Nora whispered into the dim interior, her voice hoarse, her eyes refusing to meet his. She adjusted the hem of her frayed coat to cover Lily's bare ankles. "Or close to it. We haven't had heat since the gas was shut off on Tuesday. If you're going to use us to get to my father's files, you might want to move faster. She won't last another week in this city." Dante turned his head slowly. The amber light from a passing street lamp caught the hard planes of his jaw, highlighting the tight white line of his mouth. "She won't need a week," Dante said. His voice was low, devoid of the theatrical menace he used on men like Rossi, carrying instead a chilling, absolute certainty. "Dr. Hale has been our family physician for 20 years. He maintains a fully equipped pediatric ICU inside the Park Avenue residence. By the time we cross 57th Street, she will have an IV, oxygen, and a team of specialists who answer only to me." Nora swallowed hard, her chest tightening. "Why? You said my father destroyed your family. You said he put your father in a federal cage to rot. Why aren't you throwing us out onto the pavement?" "Because," Dante replied, leaning forward just enough for the shadows to carve deep hollows under his cheekbones. "Venefica means poison, Nora. And your father poisoned my world with lies, paperwork, and stolen jurisdiction. But a child with a fever has nothing to do with the federal archives. And I am not a savage, despite what the tabloids print in the morning editions." "You're a syndicate boss," Nora retorted, her flash of bitter defiance breaking through the exhaustion. "You walked into a legal auction with 40 armed men and bought the building mid-bid just to corner a judge's daughter." A ghost of a humorless, razor-thin smile touched Dante's lips. "I bought the building because Vincent Rossi was about to smash an heirloom that didn't belong to him. And I bought the auction house because I prefer to own the ground I stand on when I collect a debt." The Maybach glided smoothly down a private gated ramp beneath an ornate limestone Beaux-Arts cooperative at 740 Park Avenue. The tires made no sound against the heated concrete of the subterranean garage. Before the car had even come to a complete stop, the door on Nora's side swung open. A tall man in a crisp grey suit stood waiting with an open umbrella, though the garage roof was bone dry. It was Dr. Hale, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the overhead security lights. Behind him stood two female nurses in sterile scrubs, wheeling a compact, high-tech transport incubator lined with warm fleece. "Bring her," Dante commanded softly, already stepping out into the subterranean chill. Nora hesitated for a fraction of a second, her arms tightening around her daughter. The sheer overwhelming power radiating from Dante's inner circle was terrifying. But looking down at Lily's flushed, damp forehead, she knew she had no choice. She carefully transferred the sleeping child into the waiting nurse's gentle arms, watching as they secured oxygen tubes with practiced, lightning-fast efficiency. "Follow them," Dante instructed, gesturing toward a private elevator tucked into the corner of the stone wall. "I need to make a call, then we talk about your father's legacy." The penthouse on the top floor of Park Avenue was a fortress of glass, dark walnut, and museum-grade art that smelled faintly of burning cedar and ozone. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, dizzying view of the Manhattan skyline, glittering like a field of scattered diamonds under the midnight frost. Nora stood by the edge of a massive marble fireplace where a real fire crackled, casting dancing orange shadows across her face. A cup of hot chamomile tea steamed on the table beside her, untouched. Through a set of double-frosted glass doors down the hall, she could hear the quiet, rhythmic beep of medical monitors and the murmur of Dr. Hale's voice attending to Lily. Heavy footsteps echoed across the hardwood floor behind her. Dante walked in, having shed his overcoat. He wore a fitted charcoal button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, exposing forearms corded with muscle and crisscrossed with faded white scars, evidence of a life born in blood and asphalt. He set a heavy, leather-bound metal briefcase onto the mahogany desk before turning his amber gaze toward her. "She's stable," Dante said, reading the raw terror in Nora's posture before she could ask. "Hale started her on intravenous antibiotics. Her lungs are clearing. She'll sleep for the next 12 hours. Nora closed her eyes, letting out a long, shuddering breath that felt like dropping a 50-pound weight off her shoulders. Her knees felt weak, and she finally sank into the edge of a velvet armchair, wrapping her hands around the hot teacup just to feel something stable. "Thank you," she whispered, the words tasting strange and fragile on her tongue. "Don't thank me yet," Dante replied, pulling out the chair opposite her and sitting down. He popped the two brass latches of the metal briefcase with a sharp, echoing click. Inside the case sat a sleek, military-grade, cryptographic hard drive encased in brushed titanium, stamped with the federal seal of the Southern District of New York. Beside it lay a stack of yellowed legal transcripts, dated October 1998, bearing the signature of federal judge Arthur Higgins. "Your father didn't just prosecute my family, Nora," Dante said, his voice dropping into a register so cold it made the air in the room feel heavy. "He didn't just dismantle the Moretti shipping lines. He buried evidence. The offshore asset trails belonging to the federal prosecutors who framed my father for crimes we never committed, ensuring our family name was wiped out while they split the spoils." Nora stared at the titanium drive, a cold dread pooling in her stomach. "What does that have to do with me?" I told you, he threw me out when I was 18. He changed the locks. He told the press I died in a car crash in Switzerland, so he wouldn't have to acknowledge a daughter who married outside his social circle. He didn't change the locks on everything, Dante countered sharply. He reached into the case and pulled out a small, heavy brass key attached to a faded red ribbon, the exact key that had hung around Judge Higgins's neck until the day he died of a massive stroke in his chambers 2 months ago. Your father was a paranoid man. He knew the syndicates would come looking for the unredacted ledgers once he lost his federal immunity. So he encrypted the primary database using a biometric hash tied to his immediate bloodline. Dante leaned forward, his amber eyes locking onto Nora's with an intensity that burned right through her defenses. Your DNA, Nora. You are the only living soul on this earth who can unlock the master archive on this drive. Nora stared at the key, then up at Dante. A bitter, hollow laugh escaped her lips, shaking and fragile. So that's why you bought the building. That's why you found me in that wretched liquidation warehouse. You didn't save us out of pity. You hunted me down because my blood is the password to your revenge. I saved your daughter because no child deserves to freeze in a warehouse, Dante shot back, his voice rising, vibrating with a raw, repressed fury that silenced the room instantly. He stood up, towering over her, his chest heaving. And I found you because every single night for 28 years, I have stared at the ceiling of this penthouse and sworn on my mother's grave that I would tear down every institution, every judge, and every politician who stole my childhood. He slammed his hand down flat against the edge of the mahogany desk. The teacup rattled, spilling a hot amber drop onto the marble. And now, Dante continued, his voice dropping to a harsh, dangerous whisper as he leaned down until his face was inches from hers. The daughter of the man who destroyed my life is sitting in my living room, sleeping under my roof and holding the exact key I need to finish the war. The silence that followed was so absolute, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the penthouse. Nora didn't flinch. She looked straight back into those haunted, amber eyes, seeing the profound, agonizing wreckage of a boy who had lost everything at age 10, trapped inside the body of a ruthless syndicate boss. If I unlock it, Nora whispered, her voice steady now, stripped of all fear, replaced by a quiet, unbreakable dignity. What happens to us when you get your revenge, when the archives are exposed and the judges and politicians fall? Do you lock us back out in the cold? Do you throw us away like Rossi threw away my grandmother's ring? Dante froze. The fierce, burning rage in his eyes flickered, replaced by something sudden, sharp, and entirely foreign. He stared at her lips, at the defiant tilt of her chin, at the trembling hands wrapped tightly around the teacup. Slowly, deliberately, Dante straightened up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the platinum and sapphire ring he had rescued from the auctioneer's podium hours earlier. He didn't hand it to her. He placed it gently on the center of the mahogany desk, right beside the titanium drive. I don't throw away what I fight for, Nora, Dante said, his voice quiet, heavy with an oath forged in the dark. Your father took my family from me. But you and that little girl, you didn't take anything. You walked into that warehouse with nothing left to your name, and you still stood tall. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the glittering expanse of Manhattan as the first pale streaks of dawn began to bleed through the dark winter clouds over the East River. If you unlock the drive, Dante said without turning around, you get your life back. Real security. A home where Lily will never have to shiver again. Protection that no court in this city can ever touch. and I get my truth. Nora stood up from the armchair. Her boots clicked softly against the hardwood as she walked over to the desk. She looked down at the sapphire ring, its deep blue facets catching the morning light, shining brilliantly against the dark wood. She picked it up, sliding it back onto her left ring finger, where it fit perfectly, as if it had never left. Then she looked over at the titanium cryptographic drive. "Let's do it," Nora said. Dante turned around slowly, a dark, solemn expression crossing his chiseled face. He walked back to the desk, sliding the drive into the secure terminal port built into the walnut surface. A soft blue LED light blinked to life, casting a cool glow across both their faces. "Place your thumb on the scanner," Dante instructed, pointing to the biometric glass pad on the drive. Nora took a deep, steadying breath. She pressed her right thumb firmly against the glass. Beep! A cascade of green. Cascading code flooded the monitor screen as decades of hidden federal corruption, sealed indictments, and suppressed evidence unspooled across the glass. The ghost of 1998 was finally waking up. Dante watched the lines of text roll by, his jaw tight, his eyes reflecting the emerald green light. But for the first time in nearly 3 decades, the emptiness inside his chest didn't feel quite so cold. He turned his head, looking down at Nora standing right beside him in the quiet dawn of Park Avenue. And for the first time all night, a faint, genuine warmth touched the edges of his ruined world. What would you do if your entire life was suddenly upended by a secret past you never knew existed? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit subscribe for more intense, emotionally charged drama stories. And tell me which character's twist shocked you the most.